What's up, everybody? The next screening of Left at Wall is June 8th in Idlewild, California. That's June 8th, Idlewild, California. We're going to do a short stand-up show, a screening of the film, and a Q&A after with myself and members of the cast. Get tickets and all information at romplacone.com. That's Idlewild, California, June 8th. See you there. Episode 33, Katie Love. Katie Love is an author and comedian. Also, she escaped a cult. At least that's how she looks at it. And for the record, I do as well. This episode concerns the Jehovah's Witnesses and how Katie Love eventually walked away from that religion after being indoctrinated into it at the age of 9. She also suffered abuse while she was there, and disclaimer, while we don't go into as much detail as she does in her book, we do talk about it. Another disclaimer, a member of my family is a Jehovah's Witness. During the interview, I referenced this, and I mentioned that person's relationship to me. Upon further reflection, it was decided to bleep that out. Said detail is not important. All you need to know is I do have a member in my extended family that's a Jehovah's Witness. We can just leave it there. Please welcome to the show, Katie Love. Katie Love, so good to see you. It's been way too long. How are you?
I'm well, Ron. How are you? You're looking good.
You too. It's
on Zoom, that says a lot. You know what I'm saying? That's
right.
Like a real compliment if someone said that to you over Zoom. Yeah.
So wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for doing this show. I am other than just wanting to have you because I'm a fan of your work, there's a number of things I want to connect with you on. So I'm very much looking forward to this episode. But to start, let's just start at the beginning for people who may not be familiar with what you're all about and your story. Your book is called From Cult to Comedy, 2 Tickets to Paradise. What does that mean?
Well, it's actually inverted, 2 Tickets to Paradise from Cult to Comedy. Which I had such a hard time titling this book because it really is, it's not just the story of surviving a cult. It's really kind of a mother-daughter love story about a little girl who would have done anything, to see her mother again. So the book is a memoir based on my childhood about losing my mother at an early age to suicide at age 9. And then my sister was studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and so she became my legal guardian. And I became an instant Jehovah's Witness, like, oh, this is my new life. So I went from like this latchkey kid in the 70s, like running home to see Dark Shadows and hanging out with Lucille Ball on television and watching Jerry Lewis and Macabre Dark Shadows. And that's kind of how and kind of managing an alcoholic because she was an alcoholic and keeping myself amused to all of a sudden this really structured life within my sister's family, who was 14 years older than me. So, she was in her early 20s and living this life of a lot of rules and rhetoric and Bible, Bible-based laws really in that household. And it was quite an undertaking, all with the carrot being, if you do everything that, Jehovah, God, asks you to do, then you'll get to see your mother again in paradise. And so that's the title, 2 Tickets to Paradise. And then my real escape from this cult and the journey into my life as I designed it. And then entering a new kind of tyranny called comedy. Because, there's just a really quick bridge to walk across from religious rhetoric and all of that to comedy. So I thought that was a great title. But before it was called Knock Knock Growing Up Jehovah's Witness. But that really it didn't cover the deeper and the nuanced parts of growing up the way I did in the Sacramento Valley and the Bay Area. Just, it's kind of a coming of age story too. So there's a lot of comedy in it. I have this joke where I say to people, and I had to modify it. This book is 80% funny and 20% not funny at all. And then people would call me literally crying. And they would go, I don't think it's 80% funny, and I would go, you know what? Percentages vary. Okay. So I mean, it just depends. Some people will write reviews and they're like, this is the funniest book I've ever read. And this people would be like, this tore me up. And I've literally gotten phone calls where people are sobbing on the other line, like after they've read it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry.
That's incredible though. I mean, that's, so let's like kind of back up a little bit. So how old were you when you were brought in to the Jehovah's Witnesses by your sister?
I was 9 years old. Yeah. So I was first on the scene of my mother's unfortunate suicide, and she really succumbed to her, depression at the end of the day. So I was 9 years old, and it was really, now somebody's at the door. I'm going to have to tell them.
It'd be so ironic if it's a Jehovah's Witness. How crazy would that be?
That would be so crazy.
That'd be nuts. Welcome back, and also sorry, I had the title written correctly in front of me, and I still read it backwards. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries. But, it gets it done.
So you were 9 years old when you were brought into it via your sister into the Jehovah's Witnesses, and then you started to question it, which is a beautiful sample chapter. But I was wondering if you would also just do me the honor of kind of summarizing that story as well.
Oh, of course. There were a lot of times that I questioned it. There's a chapter in there that I really enjoyed reading just because it's such a kooky story in the Bible. The Bible's just full of just nuggets of wisdom.
I've read it cover to cover because YOLO.
One of the chapters is called Doubt and a Pillar of Salt. And I use that story in the Bible about Lot's wife, and when they were just, God was destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, and she was told not to look back upon the city that was burning. And Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt because she looked back. She had doubt. And I just feel like it's such a funny story in so many ways because I was riddled with doubt from day one. I started questioning this thing at the very beginning. When they showed me a picture of these animals lazing by a pool of water and told me this was paradise, my first thought was, well, why aren't we taking care of the animals? Because they look overheated. I mean, they were like, this picture looked like everybody was hot. Where were the bikes? Where was the city trash? I grew up in Oakland, so it was like, this was a picture that didn't really depict what I thought paradise would look like. So I had to wrap my head around that. And then all through my teens, you're preaching at the door immediately. So you're hand in hand with your little partner at the door, or your family or whatever. And you begin preaching immediately and learning how to preach. And I would just I would stand in front of that door and just like hope upon hope that no one would answer the door. And you could hear people like rustling inside and running around and hiding, And then when they did answer, most of the time they said, we're not interested the moment that they opened the door. So I thought to myself, if this was really something people wanted, just as a kid, why wouldn't they want to know about it? Like the witnesses insisted that we were sharing this grand truth with everyone, and that it was such a little treasure chest of, paradise. Everybody wants to live in paradise. And I thought, well, then why don't people want it? So I thought about that as, a tween. And then, of course, when I became a teenager, then the doubt really settled in and I started questioning everything. And there's some hilarious scenes all throughout the book where I'm like, no, I don't think so. But I would just shut that down because I had this embedded image of seeing my mother again on this paradise earth. And, when you leave the religion, you lose all of your family. Anyone that's associated with the religion stops talking to you once you leave it. So that's quite, talk about keys to the kingdom. They hold it. They know your family is the most important thing to you. And I think that without that, I don't know how they would keep anyone in that religion, really. It's fraught with rejection. You remember Mike Uriga? Did you ever do any comedy with Mike Uriga out of the Bay Area?
That's not ringing a bell.
And he used to run this show called Bay Hilaria. So when I first started at the Improv, and when I first started in comedy, I had a little joke about Jehovah's Witnesses. And he said, you know what, you need to add this tag that there was so much rejection in that religion. And that's why I went into show business. I was like, oh my God, that's a brilliant tag. I'm taking it.
That is.
So,
so what defines a cult?
I think there's a lot of definitions of cult based on, religious statistics, or those who've studied, the world religions probably have varying degrees of definitions of it. For me personally, the definition of a cult is anything where the doctrine is so rigid, you can't possibly win. And it is about power and control, and it is about separating you from the things you love, and an or else kind of rhetoric, and or else kind of demand. And for the Jehovah's Witnesses, with the shunning that they do, it's really a hard line, because, your own family. My sister played a very interesting role in my life, because she was my mother, but also my sister. So, if she's 14 years older than me and she takes me on as a 9-year-old, she's only 23 years old. So, and I'm a kid. She raised me, until I left the house when I married at a very young age. And that was a really interesting relationship, to have sister, mother all in one, and guardian. And to lose that person was really difficult, because it was a cornerstone in my life. But I had to make a choice, because I could not stay in this religion anymore. I just couldn't do it. I felt suppressed. I felt that I had no artistic expression. You are trained from a very young age that you are no part of this world, which means that anything outside of the Jehovah's Witness religion, whether it's sports, or whether it's creativity or artistic endeavors, is considered worldly. So you're just supposed to pretty much, work at a job that's honorable, and just go to the meetings and preach. And that just wasn't me. And I fought against it for many years. And finally, on my 30th birthday, I went to the Bahamas, Paradise Island in the Bahamas, which is such a great metaphor. When I look back on it, I never thought about it at the time. But I left my religion on Paradise Island, which was the very carrot that they hold to say, hey, if you want to make it to paradise and see your mom again, stay in this religion. I left the religion in the Bahamas on Paradise Island by fornicating my brains out with one of the islanders. I got to tell you, really good time, really good chapter. When I broke a 10-year celibacy, 10 years of celibacy, which then made my act at the time. I'm kind of redoing my act right now. I'm like, I don't know if I want to talk about all this now. But I had a very sexual act for a really long time. And I just think that part of it's based on, listen, kids, I was celibate for 10 years. And now we're going to talk about sex all the time. And now I'm older, and I'm like, well, I do still have it on my mind, of course, and dating and all that. But now I want to look at doing something different with my comedy, and just talking about the different, nuances that arise from writing a book like this, and from having some objectivity on my life after writing this memoir. So my comedy's in flex right now. Still like the old jokes, but it's just funny when I look back on how repressed I was, and just how by the time I got out of it, I was 30. And then I went into comedy in my early 30s in San Francisco. Started off at the Holy City Zoo. Met Aisha Tyler in line at the Holy City Zoo. Patton Oswalt was doing a lot of comedy there. Laurie Kilmartin was doing a lot of comedy there. Just all the people from the Punchline in San Francisco and that whole scene. I don't know if you were in that scene ever in San Francisco, but
I've only ever been through San Francisco to do shows. I've never spent a significant amount of time there.
It was a scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love your definition of a cult, and I kind of feel like at a micro level, like a lot of my life has just been leaving varying degrees of cults. And I kind of wanted to get into some of that with you, but also, easing into that. So
Oh, no kidding.
yeah. And
Wow.
so I, and it's weird because I don't want to overstep, but,
Yeah.
like in that, because she's my and she's a sweet lady. But
Yeah.
I wonder, I mean, sometimes I kind of want to ask him, like, does she know that, like as her family, like, do we make it clear, hey, you can walk away from this and there's people who have your back?
It would be
And
good to say something like that, I think, because
really,
here's the thing. They call their religion, a lot of the baseline of the religion is they're seeking the truth, and that their religion is the only true religion. And they are not allowed to go on the internet and research this big truth of theirs. They are not scholars of religion. They are very encapsulated in the, I keep saying the word rhetoric, and I wish I could think of another word right now, but it's just always the word that
dogma,
doctrine. Yeah, doctrine.
Yeah, doctrine, dogma.
Yeah, but it's very fierce. And there's a lot of guilting and shaming and fear. It's very fear-based. Don't go reading things from apostates. So I am an apostate. I'm what's called an apostate because I speak up against the religion.
Okay.
But it's not really against the religion, because here's the thing. I can only talk about the religion through my own lens and my own perception and my own understanding and my own experiences of what happened to me. But then there is the world at large and the investigations that are ongoing about serious child abuse allegations, and how they, just until a couple of years ago, in fact, maybe a year, they would not give up the names of people that came to them with confessions of child abuse. And they were protected by the clergy penitent law that still is in effect in several states, about how if a member comes to a member elder of the church, whatever religion it is, that they're protected with this clergy, confidentiality law, and that they don't have to report those crimes to the authorities. Well, now there's been a huge upheaval of these elders that have kept these stories quiet for years. And my story is very interesting because the abuse that happened to me by an elder was recorded on, and this was verified through my attorneys. It was recorded and sent on a special form to the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and held in a secret database. So years later, when a judge ordered this database to be released, I believe it was a case in San Diego, they refused to release this database. Why? It's full of people they're pedophiles that have come to, they were either like let go in the religion, but then they're let go out into society where they can then, wreak havoc. They could go work for a children's hospital. They could go work at a school, but the authorities don't know about them because they've never been reported. They keep all their crimes and they police within their own organization. And that's very culty. Leah Remini did a 2-episode piece under her show that she had about Scientology. And it was very interesting because the people that they interviewed and the 2-episode piece was very well done. It was very, very accurate. And, this is years later. This is 30 years after my experience, and it's still going on today. That gives me a very nauseated, furious feeling that 30 years later, they're still getting away with this nonsense. And, now they are saying, oh, we report all crimes against, children or, women, whatever, to the authorities. Well, then there was further investigations that said that wasn't true. And there's been trials and arrests about it, which is the first time I've seen any of that happen in years. And so I had to, as a victim, sit back and watch them get away with it for years. And when I went to write the book, I was in kind of a bubble. And I started doing research myself. And I found all of these stories, especially one out of Australia, where 1,000 children came forward. 1,000 babies, and by babies I mean minors, but young as 5 years old, came forward with serious sexual abuse allegations about the witnesses and how they sent their lawyers out there just to fight that case. And, I just think they're kind of willfully ignorant. They don't research anything about their own religion because they're forbidden to. And then there's all this shame, guilt, and fear that they're not going to make it into, the new system of things, which they call paradise. If they have any kind of doubt, if they have any kind of inkling to want to research these rumors that they call them rumors, or these allegations. So, when it comes to having a Jehovah's Witness in your family, I'm not going to tell you that they're terrible people. I will tell you that there is a willful, and it's almost willful, maybe the wrong word, but there's a trained ignorance there. There's an assumed identity that you're not going to push the buttons, because everybody that does leaves. The evidence is clear. And for my own sister, I haven't spoken to her in, I don't know, 25 years or something. It's really sad, but would we be friends if we spoke now? I don't know. This is a lifetime of loss, and it disintegrates families. So my definition of a cult is very honed in on, does your doctrine teach love? Does it teach the golden rule? Or does it say, this or else? And if it's this or else, I would investigate it. Because if they're going by the Bible and the scripture that God is love, which of course in the Bible, if you're, this is a thing that I bring up in the book. If you're God and you're you're the editor in chief of the Bible, you've got some problems with your writers, because there's so much inconsistency in this book, right? And, if I'm the editor of, I don't know, Variety or whatever, I'm looking at, do I have consistent narration, a consistent tone, a consistent messaging in this magazine? I'm the editor in chief. That's my job. So if you're God, wow, are you the editor in chief of the Bible, right? So why is it such a hodgepodge of different information? God is love on one page, and then, 2 pages later, a woman's being dragged out to the desert and being stoned to death because she, cheated on her husband. And maybe he was abusive. I don't know. I'm just saying that that's the trouble with the Bible, is that nobody really knows if it's the truth. It's the longest living documented book alive today, right?
Right.
But who knows if it's really the word of God, and who knows what God is. Like, I bring up that a lot in the book at the end. Like, I raised my hand and said, guess what? I don't need all the answers, and I don't need a label on myself. Are you an atheist now? I don't know. Sometimes,
Yeah.
Are you a believer? I get a lot of that. Well, you're still a believer? I'm like, I might be agnostic. I might be a groovy Oprah religion where I believe in a higher power or something. I don't want labels, and I don't want to have to answer those questions, because there's the answers are still formulating, I think, when you just...
People really want something definitive.
They really want you to
They really do. I mean, I think that, I guess I am by definition, I mean, depending on how you want to define the term, but if you just define it literally, I personally, I guess I am by definition an atheist, because if you just look at it as a theist, you don't have a God. Okay, well, that's me. But obviously, you can dive into it a lot more than that, because if someone's like, well, by atheists, are you saying there's nothing out there? And it's like, no, I don't know that there's nothing out there. I don't know how anyone can definitively say that. And it's so funny. One time this guy...
please give me a call if you leave the planet before I do.
Right.
And let me know.
Back at you. Let me know.
Find a way to get a hold of me, Ron. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I remember this one guy, and he was, I don't know if he was Mormon or what his deal was, but he was doing like a survey, and he came up to me and he said, do you believe in God? And I was like, that's really not a yes or no question, but I can tell you, my thoughts on the whole thing. And I kind of went into it with him. I'm like, if you're asking me, do I believe in these man-made gods? Like, no, out of all 3,000, there is not one that I believe in. If you're asking me, can I definitively say there's nothing beyond us out there? I don't know, I don't know.
Shrug our shoulders because we don't really know. And then I've had people that say, of course we know, just look at science. And I go, I am looking at science. But even the scientists sometimes go, well,
we haven't explained that. They're like, we don't know. And science is based on exploration and evidence. So it's like, you can't, when people try to compare religion and science, I'm like, well, that's right now you're just making a false dichotomy because religion is by definition a pseudoscience. You can't compare a science and a pseudoscience. It's just impossible. You're just wasting your bandwidth. And so when I got done talking to this guy, though, he listens to everything I just said to him, and he goes, so you believe in God then?
I know, they love, and that's
they love to. And I'm like,
do you find that in art? Okay, I got myself straight one day because I was a long time ago. I left the religion. I think I was out for about 5 years, and I was interviewing a band, and the band was called Scotland, and they were they were from Scotland. No, they were called Texas, but they were from Scotland. That's what it was. So the band is called Texas. Great band. And, I was writing for this little rag newspaper in San Francisco. And I got a little laminated badge that said Club Town. I used to be able to go in dance clubs, that looked like very worldly and very Sodom and Gomorrah in San Francisco. And I really loved that because I wanted to really be out there in the world. So in between all this, I was interviewing this band. And I asked her to categorize her music. Wow, was that a mistake? And I really learned something from it. She got really pissed off. And she said, I'm really tired of people trying to label my music under a certain category. We are artists first. And we are in, this is an act of self-expression first. And if you want to categorize it because it's an easier way to sell, that's something else. That's marketing. And I thought about that for a long time. And I'm like, all throughout the different genres of art, whether you're an actor or a writer or, you're a visual artist, everybody wants you to give up a category. They want you to fall under a category. And I find that while the brain likes to categorize and it likes to sort, why do we do that to each other as artists? Like, oh, she's the kind of comic that she's kind of blue, or she does this or that, or she's observational humor. Oh, aren't we all a little bit of everything? Isn't that why we're doing comedy?
Well, I get called
how to express ourselves. We got to get in a mic. I mean, I don't know.
I get labeled a political comic a lot because I talk about that in my act, and I always have. And it always has been peculiar to me. I mean, I get why people do it, because sometimes it's like, if you really don't want that kind of thing, or you really do, it's cool that you can find it or avoid it. So I kind of get that to an extent. But on the same note, I'm just kind of like, no one's ever been called a dating comic. No one's ever been called. Right. Why has no one ever called me a cat comic? Why has no one ever called me? It's like no one ever calls me. Are you still
doing Catter Days? Are you still doing that?
Lucy and Ron still going. Absolutely. Yeah. It's monthly now, because doing it weekly was just too much. Mostly for the art. I mean, I just wrote them, but the artist, that's just way too labor intensive for the artist.
Right.
But yeah, Chris and I
gotta get
thank
back
you
on that roster.
We're still doing it.
Is that on your Instagram? I don't know how I used to see it.
It's on my Instagram. It's on my Facebook. It's still out there. It's just monthly now. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. But so I was raised Catholic. So when you're talking about covering up corruption and stuff, I can't relate. But I was raised that way.
They said they were kind of sorry and they had some restitution. Of course, they were forced into this restitution, right?
Right.
But at least they said they were sorry, Ron. The JWs are like, nah, oh, we let them, no, that didn't happen. Let us get all our lawyers. Like, it's really creepy because they're out there preaching. They're knocking on doors. They're coming to your house. They're standing in public places going, read our pamphlets. We love family. And sometimes I walk by and I mumble things as I'm walking by, and I'm like, here's the thing about that, they get free speech and so do we.
Right.
So I really want to honor that. Like, I saw them at the book fair, and my book had just come out. My publisher and I went to the LA Times book fair, and they had a booth. And I had like this moment of anxiety. I was like, oh my God, I can't. He goes, let me take a picture of you standing in front of the booth. And I go, oh my God. And my whole body was just like, I was in like a kind of a PTSD thing. And I was like, this is horrifying. And later I looked at the picture and I posted it where I squiggled out the faces. But it was really a photo about free speech. They belong there, and so did I.
Right.
Anyway, I'm so sorry because you were talking about being a Catholic and that you get it, No.
I mean, and I'm not trying to. I can say I have not been through anything like what you had gone through, but listening to you talk, I can relate to that on varying degrees, because when I was a teenager, I started, questioning things, and a lot of things just weren't adding up to me. And slowly but surely, I just concluded, I don't really want this as part of my life. I don't really value these. I mean, I value the love your neighbor and peace part. I think that part's great. But a lot of the other social dogma, I just have no use for it. And it certainly contradicts the whole judge not, yes, lest ye be judged, or however it goes. So there's a lot of contradictions there. I walked away from it, don't want it to be a part of my life. And, my family accepts that. I mean, a lot of members of my family did the same thing. Some haven't. And we certainly accept it, but there's still moments of some points of contention.
That whole thing, don't discuss religion and politics. Well, I think we should be able to talk about things that we don't agree with and be standing on our, on our beliefs and our value hierarchy without having to, what the Jehovah's Witnesses do, disfellowship. Like, you just don't disagree with these people. There's no questioning. You're just this little lamb, like, okay, and I don't think that's normal. That's not how the brain works anyway. The brain is always seeking more information. It seeks a way to understand things in nuanced fashion. It's one of my favorite things about being a writer is looking into, the depths of a character and looking at different views of why someone would believe something and why someone else would disagree with them. What was their upbringing that led them to, or their experiences that led them to go down this path and have this value hierarchy? And I love looking at that in fiction. I love looking at it in real life. But you don't do that when you're a Jehovah's Witness. There's no exploration. This is the way it is. And if we receive, this is my favorite part. And I should finish this thought before I forget, but if there's new light, we'll let you know. Okay. And that comes from like 6 guys in New York in suits called the governing body. Okay?
They're the guys.
The guys, the governing body guys. Okay. And when they receive new light, Ron, they're going to let everybody know. And every once in a while, so for instance, there's a site that's hysterical called XJW Humor or something. Okay. And it's hysterical on Facebook because for the XJWs, it can give you PTSD if you're on there too long. But it's hilarious because one of the things that they just changed and they got new light on, men were not allowed to have beards. So if you were a Jehovah's Witness in the congregation, you needed to be clean cut. You would fit right in. And you look like a Jehovah's Witness right now. Good for you.
Oh, all right. And, well, that's, I used to have a beard. And
if you have a beard, then you were considered worldly, and they would not let you have positions in the Kingdom Hall. And when I say a position, you got to carry a mic around and let people ask and answer questions in their little Watchtower study thing.
That's the gig you're going after. You want to be the mic person.
Right. You definitely want to be that.
Well, you're really showing them because you got the mic all the time now.
That's right.
You showed them.
You've got privileges, but only the men have privileges. The women have no privileges. And so just recently, like within the last month or so, I saw this flash on Twitter on another account that I follow where it's like the Jehovah's Witnesses have had new light. They've received new light, new information. And now men can have beards. And the memes that came out of that were hysterical. And I had forgotten little things like that. You know, you forget when you've been out for a while. And I think about how all of this stuff to her is normal. To us, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's strange because it's not normal. But for them, being entrenched in this and having fear and power as the driving force to stay in the religion, fear that they'll lose their loved ones, it's just normalized. And isn't that what being in a cult's all about? It feels completely normal to you. And then we'll say right to your face, this isn't a cult. I went to this networking thing one night. And this lady was really nice. And I was just like, it was like after COVID. And I'm like, I got to build my writing coaching business. I want to get out, and just let the ladies know I've got this new book out. I want to talk about, I just wanted to get some new clients. And I thought, I'm going to go to this little business thing. So I go to this little wine and cheese thing. And my book was fairly new. And to give a gift to the hostess, I brought a copy of my book. And she wanted to know what it was about. So I was just doing the quick, elevator pitch. And there was this really nice lady who I'd already had a conversation with. I should have noticed that she was just too twinkly in the eyes. Anyway, so she said, what religion are you referring to as a cult? And I said, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. That's not a cult. I said, yeah, actually it is. And I said, my definition is, and I started to offer her my definition. It's not a cult. She shut me off and said it 3 times. And I said, are you currently a Jehovah's Witness? She said, yes, I am. And gave me a big smile. And she was very nice. And I said, then we probably should, I will excuse myself from this conversation. I am an apostate. And you probably don't want to have a conversation with me about this. I wish you, much success in your business. And I just walked away. To me, that was the responsible thing to do for her because there was no winning for her in this conversation. And she was there to network for whatever business she was doing. And I respected that. And again, free speech. But, this is a powerful message that I'm saying that, the dedication page reads for the truth seekers and the misfits. Yeah. And I'm talking about go after your real truth. What does it look like to really go after your own truth? What does it look like and feel like in your body, in your life, in your mind to discover your own purpose for yourself? Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with anything outside of yourself. And that is a foreign concept to Jehovah's Witnesses. There's only one reason: to preach the word, save everybody so that we all make it to paradise together. So everything's set in the future, which if you want to grow up with a really big problem with time and the time it takes for people to get things done or a to-do list, grow up as a Jehovah's Witness and you'll just become this time warrior. Like, there's no time. And, my publisher has had to really work with me because I have the sense of it's just sort of embedded in my consciousness that I've got to get this done because there's just not a lot of time. And it's just like this. I don't think the world's ending, but I treat time differently than I think a lot of people. Everything feels rushed because when you get out of it, you feel like you've lost so much time and you feel you have to forgive yourself. There's a period of forgiveness where you have to work on forgiving yourself for being in this religion for this length of time. And you've lost a lot of your life, and then you feel kind of rootless when you first leave it. Because I lost every friend I knew and grew up with in one day.
No, and that's why, I do feel like many people, like most people, even though, again, what you went through was a very, high degree, high level experience. But I think a lot of people, like, they have, varying things where they can relate to that. And for me personally, it was, when I just decided Catholicism wasn't for me. And now I didn't have anyone in my family that was like, well, do or die, we're not going to talk to you anymore. And I'm glad that's the case. I'm sure there were other people who were raised Catholic who weren't as lucky as I was in that regard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Later in my life, I wasn't looking for religion in my life, but I started getting into the philosophy of different sects of Buddhism. I still think there's some beautiful things in that philosophy. I started chanting, and it just brought value to me. I liked it. So I started going to some meetings. But then, it'd be like we'd be hanging out, just kind of talking. And then somebody in the group would start preaching at somebody sitting at the table next to us. And that didn't sit well with me. And I had a conversation with one of the, kind of one of the leaders of the chapter group or whatever. And I said, look, man, like, I was raised Catholic. I walked away from it. It's more like philosophies on living life. It's more like a well-being thing. And that's the value I get out of it. And when I see the kind of religion component of it, I don't appreciate that. Like, that's just not me. And we just were not cross-pollinating there. He did not see where I was coming from. And then we were walking down the street, and there was a guy there who was, clearly just homeless and destitute. And the guy said to me, he goes, see, if I had a flyer with me, I would give that flyer to that guy. And I looked at him and I said, and I would be embarrassed to be walking with you. And that's where we're different, because that guy doesn't need your religious ideology. He needs something to eat. He needs it. And then I end up giving the guy some change or whatever.
Point. Whenever my sisters reached out to me a couple of times, over through a letter, trying to get me back in this religion. And she always put Watchtower and Awakes inside the letter. So I would open it up. First, I'd be like, oh my God, a letter from my sister. And the Watchtower and Awakes are their pamphlets that they hand out. And you see them on with their stands and all that. They have a huge publishing company. That's why they were at the LA Times Book Fair. They're publishers. So, and I had to wrap my head around that when I saw them. Of course, that's what they do. They're publishers. Anyway, so I would open this letter. It happened twice, and I talk about it in my book. And I was so excited. I saw her handwriting, but I opened the letter, and what falls out? All these Watchtower and Awakes. That's not how we talk to people. If I see you and I know that something's going on with you, I'm not going to write something and then hand it to you. I'm going to go, Ron, tell me about your life. What's going on? How can I help? Hey, don't forget this. Don't forget that. I'm going to encourage you. I would hope you do the same for me as a human being. This idea that we're going to hand somebody something, and that is if you like entertainment, but you're on your ass, am I going to run down and get a People magazine and hand it to you? It's strange. And it's not, it doesn't make any sense to me. The whole thing is like, I can't really speak for myself, but read this pamphlet. It's weird.
Right. No, and I'm with you. And that was why, do
you notice that? Here's a Bible, read it.
Yes. And I got to the point where I had to just walk away from all that. I had to, and then I just realized I'm like, okay, religion is just not going to play a role in my life, and I don't need it to. And then I realized I'm like, wait a second. If I want to read these different philosophies, I can. Sure. Nobody can tell me that I can't. If I want to chant or do anything like that, I can. And nobody can tell me that I can't. Now, I kind of just got out of it. I don't do it anymore at all.
And it's natural because you're a comedian. You're probably mostly an extrovert. I don't know. There are introvert comedians, those weirdos. No, I'm just kidding.
I fancy myself. I think I am an extrovert's introvert. That's how I fancy myself. Yeah.
But we want community. It's natural to want community. We're
right.
All you have to do is go to a movie theater and watch how people cluster together in a giant movie theater with all these empty seats. And you can stand in the back and look how people cluster together like cows. Get out of here. I want to eat my popcorn by myself. I don't need to herd with you. But that's me. We do need community. And I think that sometimes when we're excited about something, we reach out. I've had issues where I've like taken meditation classes, and I've had people get preachy and I just freak out and I never go back. You know, if something but there's always that thing too, where it's like, if you put 100 people together in a room, pretty much guarantee that four of those people are going to be loons. Okay. It's just like, and that's not very nice to the mental health industry. I'm just saying that in my perception, this is going to be somebody that's going to preach at me. They're going to do something, say something weird and start, their rhetoric on me. And it's going to happen I'm a nut magnet. It's going to happen in five minutes.
Well, and that's the thing. And that's why I just feel like there's so many just sort of cults or maybe micro cults in life where it's like, I mean, I feel like you brought up politics. I feel like there are so many cults in politics. And, I mean, using kind of myself as an example here, I prefer performing overseas because, look, politically, I'm a leftist, I'm a socialist, so I'm not on the spectrum in the U.S. So, in my act, I really take shots at the system as a whole. Because that's just what I know. That's how I talk about it. Yeah. And overseas, that they kind of expect that because they have an outsider view of the U.S. When I first got back from Edinburgh and I was on a show, I did a Joe Biden joke, and one of the other comedians on the show actually had a freaking meltdown. Had a freaking meltdown on me. I found out this person also works for the Democratic Party, and I was just sitting there, and I'm just like, first of all, you should hear what I have
for us all to have something to say. Isn't that what's we're where we're at right now? Because people don't have permission to say what's on their mind.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah. And for me, I mean, I listened to this and I'm just like, first of all, you should hear what I have to say about the other guy if you don't like what I'm saying about Biden. But also, I mean, this is freaking nuts. It wasn't even that hard hitting of a joke even.
Right.
And so, I mean, there are political cults. There are, religious cults. There are cults around yoga. There are cults around diet.
That's got to be something in your act, a yoga cult. Well, that just needs to be a Netflix series.
I think there probably has been. I mean, it was that one, I forget the sect of it, but it was that thing where that guy, just ended up sleeping with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it really is a thing. So, I mean, so going on all that, how do you walk away from a cult? Just speaking broadly, how do you just walk away from it? Because I feel like we all have in varying degrees.
I'll tell you what my advice is now, and I'll tell you what I did when I walked away from it when I was 30. And this is hilarious because he's considered rather a cult himself. But I got a Tony Robbins. So I left the religion. I knew that I couldn't stand it anymore. I felt it was very hypocritical. Plus, I was really horny. I'd been celibate for 10 years. I couldn't stand it anymore. I was celibate through my whole 20s. I was like, my 30s is not going to go down like this. Not happening. So there's the setup for that. And so I was out of the religion, but I felt very rootless. I didn't know who I was. And I picked up, and you cannot read a lot of psychology books. You're forbidden to read self-help books. And so there was just like a cornucopia of information for me when I left that religion. And I became obsessed with different psychological viewpoints because it was like a smorgasbord emotionally and mentally for me. I was so excited about it. But I picked up a Tony Robbins book, Awaken the Giant Within. And that's when he had the really big giant bangs, and he would walk around with that, mic, and it was great. And there were just a lot of things that he asked the right questions in this book. And it helped me develop a way to ask myself the right questions so that when I would revert to some old belief or whatever, I would ask myself why I was doing that and what I really believed and what I really wanted for my life. What would I like this situation to look like right now? Yeah, I want to celebrate Christmas. Why wouldn't I? But a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that leave the religion never celebrate Christmas. Like they're worried to do it because all their doctrine points to that every holiday points to a pagan origin. So you don't want to be like a pagan. And I'm like, why not? Pagans look like they really know how to party. Like, if you're going to party with a pagan. And so that's how I started that whole process, just thinking for myself. I didn't know how to do that. It was very new. And to go from that and then go into comedy where, hey, you're your own director, writer, producer, promoter, you're it. And so I think that's a really interesting jump to go from, Jehovah's Witness to comedy, because you're thinking for yourself and on your feet right then. Everything's right now. And everything with Jehovah's Witnesses is way into the future. So I think that was probably part of the draw, is that I did heal myself through humor, because everything's present. You must be present to do comedy. And if you are good at it, you're reading the energy of the room. I'm not going to say I'm a great comic, and I certainly need to perform. I miss it so much. If anyone wants to book me, call me. But you get comedy in your blood and you miss it. Why? You crave that energy. Of course, you're addicted to the laughs, Of course, it's a wonderful, you won't get it anywhere else. It's a wonderful exchange of human energy, and it's right now. There's no delay. You're not going to find anything else like it. I've sang for people. I've, done some theater. There's nothing like comedy, because it keeps you in the present. And if you are in an extra Jehovah's Witness, if you came from a religious background, everything's what we're going to give you in the future based on how you act now. But all your rewards are in the future. You're going to go to heaven. You're going to end up in paradise. You're going to this, that. So I healed through humor. I healed through seeking knowledge, by shaping my own identity and by accepting the responsibility and the fact. I love this, that it became a fact for me that I am the designer of my life. I even here we are some 30 something years later. And I was like on the beach the other day, and I took a little photo of it, because I was like, oh, I love these two words together. And it sounds cheesy. I love the words life design together, because you're at the helm of your own life. You are your own truth seeker. And when you come out of something like I came out of, you're going to be a misfit for sure. But isn't that what comedy's all about? We're a misfit. You don't agree with certain things.
Supposed to be.
You have the balls to say, you know what? This isn't my favorite guy, this Joe. Okay. And here's why. And if somebody wants to have a meltdown about it, that's their story, and they have to own that. But I think we need to live in a world where we all really are committed to free speech. And, sometimes free speech hurts people's feelings. Yeah, there should be some guideposts, of course. It shouldn't be, something that we're jumping into to hurt other people. But, there's just all different ways to express our thoughts and feelings. And there's also the exchange of energy with knowledge, that we learn things from people like that, that band that told me, don't put me into a category. I've never forgotten it. And when I go to write things, I go, make sure you're not labeling this artist. I have a book out called LA Artists, where I interviewed 22 grant-winning artists under the same publisher that published my memoir. And when I went into each interview, I thought to myself, I have to be careful not to put any of these artists in any kind of like category unless they want to put themselves in that category. It's not my job to do that as the interviewer,
Yeah. Well, it's so, because one of the other things is, I think that you really hit the nail on the head when you're saying, like, people do naturally crave community. And I think at times, people will almost design cults where there shouldn't even be one. And that's when you get into like a cult comes out of politics. A cult comes out of this. Look,
I laugh at that because I see a sitcom immediately, just where this guy's
like, totally
gotta have some followers. What kind of cult can I create?
Well, it's like that
purpose,
that legendary joke on The Office where Creed is just like, I've been in a number of cults. You make more money as a leader. And it's like, When I think about how in my life I've walked away from various levels of cultdom, and I feel like that's a big part of life. I used to work on a pretty sizable podcast, and I quit that podcast a couple years ago because I just could not go in the direction it was going. And to be clear, I got a ton of emails and feedback that was completely a healthy relationship one would have with a podcast. Hey, you were really funny. We're going to miss you. Or, hey, we never liked you. Glad you're gone. Hey, that's a normal reaction. You like a podcast. You don't like one of the contributors. They leave. You're happy. You did like them. You're sad to see them go.
Right.
That's totally normal. But I also got some, death threats. I got, repent. And they weren't being ironic.
Whoa.
Like people calling me a traitor. People, I'm not too far. I live in San Pedro. I'm not too far from San Pedro. I got stuff all across the board. And honestly, I even have people I know who stopped talking to me. Yeah. And, my thing is I'm just like, that's part of life. That's part of the journey. But in some ways, there was kind of a cult element, and there was an element of just walking away, because it's something I couldn't in good conscience continue being a part of. Yeah. And it's just really heavy. And that's why I wanted to
happen a lot during Trump's, reign in the very beginning.
Sure.
And I had a friend that had very different beliefs, and people stopped talking to her. And then I had friends that said, I can't believe that you would associate with that person if they're a Trumpster. And I'm like, have you ever been shunned? Have you ever been shut off from every person you know and lost everybody you know in one day because you didn't agree with something? You didn't agree with again, the word rhetoric. You didn't agree with a belief system. Have you ever had that happen to you? Do you know what it feels like? I'll never do that to anybody, because then I'm not a creative if I have to do that. I'm saying, you know what? You believe this, and I'm not going to listen to you. I want to know what that person believes. I don't have to agree with it. If my identity is that shaken up by someone else's belief, then I need to work on myself a little bit harder. And I did a lot of work to create the Katie Love that exists today. And it's not a house of cards. I did a lot of work on who I am, what I want, how I see the world. I don't agree. I may not ever agree with anything this person says about this individual. And that's okay. I can still see the love in her heart and the support she's given me as an artist. I can still have good laughs with this person. There's always some beauty that you can find in someone. Why are we looking for everybody to be homogenized and for us all to agree on something? That, to me, is super culty. It's creepy. When I go to a concert, one of the favorite things I like about going to a concert or comedy, or I ended up at this karaoke bar the other night here in Ventura, and I just loved it because I looked around. There was every walk of life, every age, people out on a first date, families there on vacation, girls out just hanging out, let's go out and have some fun with music. And I love to look around and see diversity like that. That's what I want the world to look like. I don't want everybody to talk and walk and act the same. I'm not interested in a world that's homogenized like that. I don't think that's what community is. I think it's, you believe this, I believe that, I love you anyway. But I also know that it can get thorny. The issues are very thorny because it's like, maybe they vote for something that is, detrimental to a group. And then that becomes like, well, now you're supporting this thing that hurts this group. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it about agreeing and not agreeing. But I think we do need to have that respect with each other, that we can find common ground with each other without shunning each other and throwing each other under the bus and, death threats. It's nonsense. Aren't we better humans than that by now? Mm-hmm. I would hope so. And I'm not saying that I'm the poster child of the golden rule. I'm not. I have days where I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. How could you possibly believe it?
See, no, I feel you. And
I think that's normal. Isn't that what we do? Like in college, I didn't even, I don't have a degree, but to me, college is that big time where, you get to explore your beliefs and find out what really matters to you. You're developing your value hierarchy. And if there's no room to explore that, that's not a world that's definitely, that's full of, I don't know, free speech. I don't think that's true free speech. And that's what America is supposed to be about.
Absolutely. I hear you. And I think I agree with everything you just said. I think the one thing that makes it, like, as you described, thorny today is that, our, I think, society has just gotten so extreme that, and while I like to hear different points of view and I like to have that openness that you described, I do have some more lines in the sand where I'm like, okay, if you believe this group of people doesn't deserve to exist, that's not a different viewpoint.
Right.
And I don't need to tolerate that, and nobody should.
Right.
So it's like there are these sort of, and that is sort of the yin and yang we're all trying to balance, where it's just
there's a lot of hard lines in the sand of a crumbling sea castle, my friends.
Right.
We don't get to say, I just feel like a lot of people are out there playing God. If you want to play God, then be a fiction writer, because then you're the God of your story. And it's one of the funnest things you'll ever do is be a fiction writer. You got all these people at play, and then go ahead and be God. But out in the real world, people have a right to be there, and we have to figure out how we're going to coexist. Mm-hmm. So when you come out of a shunning cult, you just have a different viewpoint of this whole categorization. You belong over here, and this is your label, and that's your label, and these are your rights, and you're violating my rights, and it just gets to be. It loses its. I just feel like it loses its whole sense of purpose. And what are we really fighting for in the end, And we do all crave community, and you're going to find your so-called tribe. Of course, we all hang out with the people that, that we have similar viewpoints and similar senses of humor and some, but go outside your box once in a while. Find out what's out there. You can always shake your head and go, what a loon bird. All right, next. You don't have to hate that person, but you just go, oh, man, I met this guy who's crazy. And, is crazy the right word? Probably not. But, I'll probably get criticized for saying the word crazy. But I say it in a way of, it's so different, I can't even wrap my head around it. Okay?
Well, and you know what? I feel like your tribe can still have a lot of variety, and honestly, I'm not trying to be, but that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this series. In 1000, you're going to hear everything from people who have escaped cults to classic rock musicians to transgendered artists who left the US to I really want to just embrace, like creativity and craving life is something that connects us all.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast because I'm like, 1,000 people. Wow. And I thought, well, what if when he gets to I don't know, let's just say 666. What if he gets to that episode and he goes, that Katie episode, I'm not sure if she still qualifies to be one of the 1,000 interesting people. Because now at 666, I'm seeing a lot of different. And I'm like, I wonder how it's all going to change.
I do have to have fun with that number.
999.
Yeah, when I get to, I've already accepted there's going to be a ton of people that I'm just not going to be able to interview for whatever reason. It's 1,000 because I just had to have some definitive thing. But there's millions of people I would love to interview, and I'm not going to have the time. Katie, speaking of which, I know we've got long. Thank you for being so generous with your time that I could talk to you all day.
Yeah,
plug away.
You're such a talented force, and I'm really honored to be here. And I'm not saying that because we're at the end of the podcast and it's good for your ratings. I'm saying it because I mean it. You're a great guy in comedy, and sometimes we don't always find great guys in comedy. So you're one of the good ones, and I really appreciate this time you've given me.
Well, please, but before you go, please tell everyone where they can find all of your stuff, where they can get your book.
Sure.
Just plug away.
Sure. The book website is actually from culttocomedy.com. And then my website, which has all of my narcissistic crap on it, is writelaughlove.com. And when I say write, I don't mean like writer as in equestrian. So when I say social media, Katie Love Writer, if I ran up to a horse right now, the horse would run away, is what I'm saying. So it's Katie Love Writer, WRITER, not writer. I get that a lot, so that I thought I would do that disclaimer. And then the book is on Amazon. The book is in indie bookstores. You can order it from any bookstore. It's at Barnes and Noble. A couple of the Studio City's carrying it right now. Calabasas has it, but you can order it anywhere. And it's of course on Amazon. It's also on Audible and ebook if you're into staring at your computer screen instead of carrying around my pretty book so everybody can see the cover. Weirdos and your ebooks reading on the bus when you could hold this beautiful cover up. And everybody would be like, tell me about that book. But nobody does that anymore because they're holding up an iPad. And it's really sad to me. But that's okay. I'm not going to judge you. Look how easy I go into judgment. That's what growing up in a cult will bring you.
I prefer
judgment very easy.
I prefer a physical book, but I can't. I mean, I got to be honest. The Libby app is just so freaking convenient.
I need to look into that because I didn't know I wasn't on it. So now I'm like, okay, I got to look into this. So
I'm only in the Los Angeles library and the Pasadena library, so I think that could be part of it.
Okay, well, I'm going to get on that. I want to be everywhere.
Right. Katie, thank you so much for doing this.
All right. Have a good one.
That was Katie Love. Music for the 1000 podcast was provided by Andrew Saxena. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review, would you? A 5-star review goes a long way. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/romflacone. For a Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of exclusive perks. You get these episodes before they drop. You get a bonus podcast between Drew and myself. You get free admissions to virtual screenings and other events concerning my films. And that's all for a Give What You Can level. We got a great community going on over there. Patreon.com/romflacone. All right. Because today's episode was a little longer than usual, I'm going to wait until next week to start on the questions, but I will be starting on that. So stay tuned for that next week. And until then, you know the drill. 33 deep, getting closer to 1,000. See you next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.